let's just cut to the chase with paginated reports, meaning what do I need to get started? Maybe some of you have already got paginated reports down, you've already published some, but for those of you who might be new and want to learn how to get started, this is kind of like the simplest way I could think of how to describe that. There's a tool for creating paginated reports. This is a different tool from Power BI Desktop. And it's one that if you're familiar with, reporting services, back in SQL Server, on premises land, they had a report builder in that product. Well, they've revamped that for use with Power BI. Turns out that it doesn't look a lot different, but there are differences in how you publish and how you save files, and I talk a little bit about that too, and how you would set up the architecture within Power BI. Maybe some of you don't look at Power BI as needing too much of an architecture, but when you start talking about data flows, when you start talking about shared data sets, when you start talking about apps, different apps, and how to show different data across different apps, you have to lay it out in a diagram. Once you do that, in my book, that's an architecture. So I'll talk about kind of ideal architectures when it comes to setting these kind of reports up, because I've seen it done two ways. There's very good reasons for each way, but kind of I'll show you kind of what I do and how I plan for kind of like the best bang for your buck. DAX Studio is an external tool to Power BI, but is one that is very, very useful. Again, if you've just been in Power BI Desktop and you're very familiar with developing reports in Power BI Desktop, you may have never touched DAX Studio. But when it comes to testing your models, testing your metrics, somebody sees something funny on a dashboard and they want to know why. DAX Studio allows you to query the data set behind your reports in a way that is just a lot faster. It's a lot faster to get like what all categories are in my report right now. Why is the dashboard missing a category? Or why is this particular order not showing up? You can search on orders with DAX Studio. So I'll show you a little bit about how to write DAX query. If you've never ever written a DAX query when dealing with paginated reports, I think it's extremely useful. And then in terms of licensing, unfortunately, Power BI Pro, which is the minimum license for publishing Power BI reports to the cloud, that Pro licensing doesn't cover you for publishing paginated reports. So there's reasons for it. I'm sure Microsoft has back-end infrastructure that's needed for these paginated reports, and there's a lot of power you get with them, like programmatically speaking. You get a lot of functionality with REST APIs and with Power Automate. I'll touch on some of that. So to get all of that, you're going to need the right license, and they just recently announced a new licensing model called Premium per User. Maybe some of you are already familiar with Premium Capacity. Premium Capacity, a lot of people aren't a big fan of Premium because of its cost. It's retail costs $5,000 per month for the lowest capacity SKU. So Microsoft, I think, heard that and has seen the client base grow and has seen the importance of having to create an alternative way to do that licensing for people. So Premium per user, now it's $20 per user per month. I hope I'm right on that. Mark Doherty, Mark Yenabach, if you guys, one of you guys can check me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's just $10 more per month than than what it is for a pro license,
Yep,
which
that's correct.
okay, cool, thank you. So yeah, you can compare that to the competition. That is very, very competitive with competitors like Tableau. I think I'm not sure if Looker has a per user license or not, but very competitive. Um, there's premium capacity, which I already talked about, and then there's also premium embedded also. So if any of you guys are doing projects where you've got maybe a little application that this might be useful for, and you don't want to put out the money for premium per user, but you need this kind of like across different workspaces, there's a lot cheaper SKUs. Called premium embedded SKUs, which you can enable in your Azure portal. And once you turn those on, as long as it's Gen 2, now there's a difference. If you guys have messed with this in the past, they just recently added this Gen 2 offering. So you need the Gen 2. There was a premium embedded offering before that was not Gen 2. You want the Gen 2 in order to support paginated reports. But there, you know, if you need it, you got some cloud application you're developing and you really like these paginated reports, you can spin up one of these, and it's a lot more cost, a lot more economical. So once you get all of that installation, the right license, you're able to publish, then you know the next thing you're going to want to do is learn about how to write these reports. There's a lot to them. Unfortunately, they're not the easiest things to write. There's a great video by Peter Myers, who I think whoever wrote in the chat, if this was a repeat presentation, hopefully it's not. And then Paul Turley, he's been my reporting services reference for a long time. And I just looked up on his blog, and he doesn't disappoint. He has paginated report recipes on his blog that you know, may be useful to you guys, just so you guys can kind of see the breadth of what you can do with this tool. Okay. So when I talked about limitations in Power BI, let's look rather than me just talk about it. Why don't I just show you guys? Let's go to some samples here. Okay, so I've got a CRM type dashboard with opportunities, opportunities here, you know, with revenue values, and then we've got how many how many opportunities are in what stages, so which opportunities have closed. So if I have any brand new Power BI people in the audience, cross filtering is a very popular feature within Power BI, and also just filtering with, you know, your regular slicers or filters in your filter pane. Now, now what you'll notice here is this is really great for exploration, right? I can select the data that I want. I can see a lot of different things. Here I have a hyperlink that will take me to that particular opportunity in my CRM system. I can swap visuals if I want, from pie charts to tables and so on and so forth. What this doesn't do, though, is unfortunately, if I try to export this, which is a lot of what our customers do, right? We can't help people, you know, doing what they want to do. They want to export the data because they want to do something else with it, maybe show it to their teams or their executives, what have you. When I open this file, you're going to see that it doesn't look like the report. It's just a dump, right? It's just the data. There's no formatting. Now, and like as you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but I don't have a hyperlink here like there was down here, right? So With paginated reports, you do have control. You do have control over the formatting. You can, what you see in a paginated report in the browser, when you export it to PDF or to Excel, you can preserve the format. Okay. Another thing, subscriptions. So very popular feature within reporting platforms. People want to get this data, you know, on a Monday or whatever, right? On a Sunday or on a Friday, whatever. Power BI reports and dashboards have the ability to create subscriptions. However, the subscriptions, when you fire them off, they do include a link to the report and a preview image to the report, but not the actual data, right? And a lot of reporting platforms, when they tell you about subscriptions, or when we think about subscriptions, many of us, we might think, oh, I want the data. I'm thinking I'm going to get a CSV or an Excel dump of the data that I want, right? Maybe opportunities that I own that are still open, that have been open longer than 30 days. You know, give me that report. I want that report. I want it every Monday, so I know which opportunities I should be updating or going for. So these types of reports don't help us out much in that regard. These are what I would say, what I would call online. You have to be online, right? You've got to be somewhere with an internet connection. You've got to be on your mobile phone with good reception, and then you can interact with the report and you can answer your questions. But what if, you know, a lot of questions or a lot of needs sometimes will defer us to the paginated report option, like, you know, I want this in my inbox, because if I get on an airplane, I'm not connected, and I don't want to be. I just want to open my report. It should be in my inbox, and I should be able to twiddle with that data on my way to wherever, Germany or whatever, right? So that's the kind of things that paginated reports can address. Now, are there other options? Yes, there are other options. There is an option called Analyze in Excel, which also allow you to create kind of like Excel reports, and we've done that too. But that's kind of outside of the scope of this talk. There's also XMLA endpoints. XMLA endpoints, I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into DAX Studio, but it's a way to connect to the online data set and pull just the data that you want. And, you know, one of the things that you'll notice here when I exported, I don't know if you guys may or may not have noticed this, one of the things that you run into with Power BI is there's limitations. So if you're trying to export Excel, you're limited to 150,000 records. If you're trying to export in CSV, you're limited to 100,000. What about if your data that you want to download is 400,000 records or whatever, right? Now, I'd argue once we start talking about millions, if you're dealing with millions of records, this is probably the wrong tool. You probably need to go, you know, with, you know, something else. There's plenty of BI vendors out there, you know, MicroStrategy, Cognos, whatever, to, you know, try to get reports in the millions of records. Why you would want that, you know, there's probably good reasons, but you know, this is not the tool for that. So, you know, we're trying to look for insights. We're trying to look for top level KPIs, or, you know, even aggregate numbers. You know, if we're summing up all of the orders, maybe the most we're dealing with is at the order level, you know. But if you want the order item level, and it exceeds the threshold of the export here in this report, then maybe you could go into paginated reports. Okay, so let me go back now that I've kind of showed you that. Something else we get asked is, can I deliver this report to someone with the filter applied? So, you know, let me pick on my own teammates here for a second. If Mark Doherty wants a report for, you know, just his opportunities, Mark Inabaugh just wants a report for his opportunities, and I want a report for my opportunities, can I set that up? With the Power BI reports I just showed you, you can't. You the best you could probably do is create a link with a URL parameter. There are URL parameters available using those Power BI reports and dashboard types. But what those URL parameters don't do is they don't show you the filter selection on the slicer. So what do I mean by that? So if I apply a URL filter to the end of this URL, yes, it will filter this report, but if the default, let me reset this report to the default here. So if I set up a URL parameter for close date, it will filter this report for the close date, assuming the close date exists. But rather than show it to you here in the slicer, that URL parameter actually adds kind of a background filter here in the filter pane, okay? Making it a little hard to know what your report is being filtered on, okay? So again, paginated reports, if we wanted to parameterize this report, we could display that parameter selection, either at the top or the bottom or wherever. We can actually display that. Another thing that I just got asked just today is, can I display the current date and time that the user is looking at this report, or export this report? The answer with dashboards, unfortunately, is no, because you're looking at the data as of the last time it was refreshed, or you're looking at maybe some data in real time, which, using a direct query connection, maybe you'd be able to get that. But using paginated reports, there's a necessary expression that could take care of that right away. And it's actually one of the default objects that gets placed on the report when you initiate a paginated report, and we'll go through that. Custom row groups. So if any of you have ever had to do a P&L report, or any kind of report that has some kind of hierarchy, in real estate, sometimes, you've got regions and you want to show sales by region. Well, this year they want west, north, east, south, right? Next year they want southeast, northwest, east, this and that, and maybe even intra-quarter or intra-month, they want row group changes. What that's meant for Power BI developers that aren't as familiar with paginated reports is that they have to go into their models and they've got to change their model. They've got to either, change a query, change a view, add a grouping. They got to do something in the data layer, then, potentially, or they have to do something in the transformation of the data on its way into Power BI using Power Query, or they've got to create some clever DAX, solution using measures or text measures or something like that. So if you've got row groups that are constantly changing, you may want to think about doing a paginated report, especially if all you're trying to show is a table or a matrix, right? If all they want is a table or a matrix and they're just going to export it to Excel anyway, why go through tons and tons of revisions of my data model and my the table that I'm trying to jimmy rig in Power BI to accomplish what I could have accomplished in paginated reports, and just kept that within that report because it's specific to that report. So, creating paginated reports is not the end all solution to everything I'm describing to you. These limitations, creating paginated reports gives you another report type so that you can start thinking about, so and so wants this export formatted. Oh, so okay, I can create a paginated report, but then what do I do? So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about how to create your own subscriptions to paginated reports, and we can compare and contrast what the experience is on creating a subscription on a paginated report versus a subscription on a regular Power BI report. Okay, and you guys can see, kind of what the differences are and how maybe the paginated report option might give you a little bit more leverage, especially when applying filters for specific users. And then also, the Power Platform, for those maybe that are not as familiar with the Power Platform, Power BI is this part of this Power Platform ecosystem, which consists of a few other services in the cloud. Power Automate is one of those services, and it's an automation engine that competes with the likes of IFTT or If This Then That, if you guys are familiar with that. It's a way to automate web services or databases or even your email. It's ways to get data from email. There's so many things you could do with Power Automate, and Paginated Reports actually has a task in Power Automate that you can fire, so that if you want to save a paginated report to a SharePoint library, or if you want to send a Power BI an Excel version to one person, a PDF version to another person, and a CSV to some SFTP site somewhere, you could do that all with Power Automate. And I have a note here that Power Automate is kind of more for the personal kind of use case. Logic Apps is kind of the enterprise version of Power Automate. It's something that's in Azure. So if you're looking for more of a IT kind of maintained kind of a service, you definitely probably want to try Logic Apps. It's just easier to maintain and run your automations with service accounts. Okay, cool. Let me stop talking. Let's start actually working with the demo here. So we're past the 4th, which is actually honestly for those of you that may have remembered, this talk was supposed to be given on the 4th of May, but my 8th grader was graduating, had a graduation ceremony that day, so we had to postpone this a little bit. But yeah, so I wanted to keep with this theme of Star Wars, and because Paginated Reports not the most exciting topic, to present on. So I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting with a cool data set. So let me get out of the deck and let's get into the report. Okay, so I'm kind of you guys have kind of caught me in the middle of the development of this thing. I just put this thing together today. Turns out that there's a very neat API called what's it called? I'll think of it. Oh, Swappy, Star Wars API. And if you go to swappy.dev, there's a publicly accessible API to be able to pull a bunch of Star Wars information. So what I'm trying to display here on this page is I'm thinking of as maybe a film producer. Now, I've never produced films. I have no idea what it takes to produce a film. I was just trying to figure out how to leverage this data set to the best of my ability. So what I've got is I've got the different Star Wars films, episode 1 to 6 here. I've got characters for each of those films, the starships in those films, the planets and the vehicles. So as I pick the different episodes, now I don't know why that one's not working, but yeah, so the idea is as I pick the different films, I can see the different objects that I would, or the different things that I would have to worry about. So in the case of like characters, how many characters would I have to dress up for the production? For vehicles, how many vehicles do I have to have the people make? For starships, how many CGI things do we've got to do? And the same for planets, right? So what I'm trying to also depict on this report is, yes, it's extremely flexible to filter across a data set like this, because I've got, if you look at my data, I've got these films in one table. I've got my characters in another table. I've got my planets in another table. and so I've got all these tables of data, right? You could probably envision some analysts going, okay, well, I'm going to download the planets and filter them by film. I'm going to filter the starships, filter them by film. I'm going to download the characters, filter them by film. So Power BI makes it really easy to be able to, distinguish. Oh, and now I just realized why this is. I have a filter here on this. I'm going to get rid of this. Sorry, that's my bad. There we go. Okay, so we got 34 characters for Phantom Menace we have to worry about, 7 vehicles. And I was about to write some metrics for the number of planets that I had to CGI and the number of starships that I had to CGI, but this is fine, okay? But here, if we try to print this report, you notice here the scroll bars. I have 34 characters that I have to scroll through. If I try to print this report or subscribe to this report, I will only get what's shown in this visual right now, right? Which is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters out of the total of 34. So that's no good, right? I need to get like a full list of the 34 characters so that I can tell my, the people that are going to dress the characters and do the makeup and everything so that they can plan for, however much, dress up and makeup they're going to need, right? So what's a good answer for that? Well, I'm what my answer is going to be and what this talk is about is a paginated report. So I do already have a paginated report built for that. But before we go there, I just want to show you guys the value in writing a paginated report against this model that has all my tables and that has my relationships already set in this model, is that if I write my paginated report against this, and I've got my dashboards that I'm about to publish also reliant on that model with the metrics and the same data, and the refresh of this data is going to be in sync, meaning when I refresh this report, these dashboards will be updated, and if my paginated report is pointed to this data set, it will also be updated. So I talk about this a little bit later, is that you want to try to I think that the best practice here is if you have paginated reports on the mind, you're thinking about doing paginated reports, try to write them against a data model, a data set. I've seen cases where people write paginated reports against a database server, your SQL server or whatever, and that's fine. The problem is though is that that SQL server connection might not be in sync with this report, causing questions. That's one thing that could go wrong. Or second thing is that maybe somebody besides you decides to change the paginated report and they filtered out something that this report does not, right? So yeah, just something to think about as you think about the architecture of your workspace and how you want to set up your reports and your data sets. Try to be thinking about how to leverage your data set, the one that we're creating inside of this file, as much as possible. Okay, so let me publish this now. Save this. Sorry, it's taking a little bit. While that's going on, I will also, okay, there we go. So here are all the workspaces I have access to. I'm going to publish it to Star Wars Production. That's the one I created for this little demo. It's asking me, do I want to replace this report? And this is important, okay? I do want to replace. So if this was a production workspace, one thing that I'm always training my Power BI developers is to always replace. Reason is because when you're deploying reports or data sets and you don't replace, all your usage metrics for that data set or that report go away. Well, they don't go away, but if like you're used to publishing a new data set and a new report, or excuse me, deleting your data set and report from the workspace and then republishing all the usage metrics that people were using your report and stuff, all that goes away. So anyway, enough about that. Replace. We'll let that guy publish. Now let me switch back over to the service. Now this is the Power BI service now. I'm in my browser, I'm logged in. Let me go to the home page. So this is my home page. I'm gonna open up my workspace. And now those that might be a little bit new to this, I'm gonna go to the workspace because I'm a developer that is contributing to this workspace. I'm publishing a data set. I would actually, if this were a real production workspace, I'd be worried about credentials that I'm using to refresh this data, and et cetera. But what I want to point your attention to also while we're at this step is that this is backed by Premium here. Now this is a Power BI embedded SKU. It's not a Premium capacity. It's a Power BI embedded capacity. So it's probably a lot cheaper than your Premium capacity. If you get Premium per user, what you would see here is a diamond with the little person icon on it. But no matter what, you need the diamond. Let's just put it that way. You need the diamond if you're going to leverage paginated reports. Okay. So here's my workspace, and let's take a look at my report. Make sure it got published. Looks like it hasn't yet. Maybe I'm competing for bandwidth. Oh, this says it did. Okay, let me refresh my browser. Maybe it's cached. Sometimes that happens. Power BI, the Power BI service, it caches as much as it possibly can. For performance reasons, obviously. If I come in here, change a bunch of filters, leave this page, come back in, it comes up right away. So they try to do the best they can for the user experience. Okay, so the report's up here now. Now, I don't know, for those of you that may be new, when I published that report, it created this report and this data set, right? I'm not going to really go into too much on that other than just saying that this object is what I want to connect my paginated report to, okay? For exploration of my data, business analysts that might be wanting to look deeper into the data or, actually do the changes. Like I actually have another report here that shows film appearances. So, how many times was each character from the Phantom Menace in other movies. Turns out C-3PO was in all of them, so we got some repeating characters. R2-D2, you got to have your R2-D2. Yoda was not in A New Hope. So anyway, if they come up with the 7th movie, we might want to share the love a little bit. So anyway, why am I showing you this? It's just saying that, again, for exploration reasons, this is really good for people that are trying to answer a lot of different questions with your Power BI report. Okay. So now let's jump into how we would actually start to create this a paginated report. Let's say I've already created one for characters. What time is it? 7:47. I'm gonna just show you guys what this paginated report looks like, okay? And then we're gonna try to create one for looks like planets. Looks like planets is a pretty big data set. So here is report builder. And if you guys are familiar with SSRS, have been there, done that, this is not going to look too different. In report builder, the things that are very different from Power BI desktop is your Object Explorer here on the left. There's different folders here. So I've got a bunch of stuff already populated, but with a brand new report, you would see these folders here. Okay, so this is kind of where you set up your connection to the data set, your queries against the data set, and the parameters of your report. Parameters here, not to be confused with like what if parameters in Power BI Desktop or your query parameters. These are actually parameters that the user gets presented with. Okay. So what I mean by that, what I mean is in Power BI Desktop, oops, sometimes you have to do this a couple times. What I mean by that is unless you're using what if parameters, query parameters is not something that Power BI, the service, exposes. Query parameters are meant for parameterizing like your data source connections, like a server name or a web URL or something like that. But in paginated reports, a parameter, the user does have to select. Okay, so here I have to pick the film I want to. This is my characters by film report. I want to show all the character information for Attack of the Clones. So I'm going to hit View Report. And here's the character information. I tried to also, in addition to the hairstyle and the makeup and stuff that we think we need for every character, I also put the species name and the species language, thinking about, oh, I'm gonna have to train, you know, I don't know what galactic basic means, but I'm gonna have to teach Darth Vader how to speak galactic basic. I don't know. Don't blame me. I just got this data set from the API. So that's kind of the user experience in Report Builder. You design the report here. You have your layout in this pane here. There's a lot of properties here for you to customize, and there are different expression. There's different syntax in this report to be able to do things like. Let me run this again for Attack of the Clones. So this up here, these parameter displays I'm doing with something called SSRS expressions. Okay, SSRS expressions are kind of like .NET. It's kind of like .NET syntax a little bit, but it does have its own syntax. Down here, I do have the execution time of this report, which is right now, today, right, 7:51 p.m. Okay, something I could not do with the Power BI desktop model. Okay, so again, watch the video from Peter Myers, but for instance, that expression language looks something like this. Okay, and they've got a lot of I guess cheat sheets is what I'll call them down here. So if I'm wanting to pull a particular field from a data set, it kind of gives me the syntax on how to do that. This happens to be a function that I found under common functions and aggregate. So as you thumb through these things, that gives you some examples so that you can start to learn SSRS expressions and how that works. Okay. All right. So let me create a new report. Before I do that though, let me save this. That's one best practice I tell you guys in the deck is that always save your paginated reports, back them up within a version controlled system. Right now, I've got this being saved to my OneDrive. I don't know if you can tell the status here. It's my OneDrive folder, so it's backed up. And I've got different versions going in OneDrive. So if I need to pull a different version because I accidentally made a change that I want to revert, I can do that. Okay, let me go File, New. and show you what it is to create these things using a Power BI data set. Because some of you might be familiar with how to do this using a SQL Server database or some other database. But yeah, for those that are brand new with Paginated Reports, here we go. So first things first, and Peter Myers covers this extensively in his training. This is like the first thing you see in the design panel. You get a text box here and this execution timestamp down here. So that kind of starts you off. And the other thing you've got is you've got kind of like the body of the report and a footer here down here, a page footer. Okay. So I'm not going to get too deep into the layout, but one thing that I will talk about right now is how to start connecting to your Power BI data set. So out of all these folders, the very first thing you're going to want to do when you create a paginated report is connect to a data source. Okay. So when I connect to a data source, it's a little bit different than a data source in Power BI Desktop. This is probing Power BI on a workspace level. I'm going to go down to the Star Wars workspace, pick the Star Wars production workspace where I have that data set. Okay, I'm going to pick it and then I'm going to select it. Okay, so that now creates this data source here. And typically I'll rename this kind of from the old days of when I used to do a lot of this stuff. I'll prefix this with a DS just so that I know it's a data source. Data set, then after I do a data source, then I got to create a data set. So a data source is basically just my connection. That's all it is. Now I need some data, right? So I'm going to add a data set here, and let me add a very simple one. This is going to be against my data source connection here, Star Wars production, okay? Now I'm gonna use the query designer quickly, and then I'm gonna get into DAX Studio for a minute to show you guys the difference. So this is the designer. Maybe some of you that have written SSRS reports against analysis services, this will look familiar to you. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up my data set for the selection of the film for my film parameter. Okay, so you guys remember in my report earlier, I had a film parameter back here that let me comb through what films I wanted. So I'm going to pull over the film ID and its title. I'm going to execute that query to see what it looks like, and this is exactly the data set I want. Okay, now this was using the query designer. Okay, so that's how I create this data set. Now let me rename this. I'm going to name this DS films. That's my films data set. Okay, now I'm going to create a planets data set, but I'm going to kind of cheat. So one thing I can do in here, each one of these visuals in my Power BI desktop file is executing a DAX query against my model. You just don't see it. So, this is executing a query. This KPI is executing a query. Every single visual is executing a query. So if you have, the more visuals you have, the longer, the slower the performance, okay? Because it's executing all those queries and it's executing them down at the same time. It does it in parallel, and it does it as fast as it can, but I've seen some very god-awful reports with like a lot of like hundreds of these boxes, and they all just spin and spin and spin and spin and spin. So just be careful. So anyway, why am I showing you this? So let's go to View and Performance Analyzer. And with this Performance Analyzer, what I can do is I can grab the query, the DAX query that each of these visuals is executing. And the one I'm interested in is in this planets visual. I want the DAX query behind this planets visual. So I'm going to hit start recording here, and I'm going to refresh the visuals. It refreshes all the visuals on the screen, and then I can see the planets query. Now, typically you would use this tool to try to troubleshoot performance of your report, but I'm using it to grab the DAX query that's being issued by this visual. So I'm going to copy that query. Then I'm going to open up DAX Studio. So I've got DAX Studio here, and I've already got it connected to my my Star Wars production workspace and my Star Wars swap SW API data set. Here's all the tables. Right now I'm connected to this data set in the cloud. Okay, so I'm going to paste that query that I just grabbed from the planet visual. Okay, and I'll run it just to be sure that it's going to get me the data set I want. Oh, the connection timed out. So I've got to reconnect. This is the first prompt you get in DAX Studio. So I'm going to connect to this workspace via this connection string. Now, don't get too hung up about the connection string because you can just get it from the workspace. If I go back to the workspace here, go to settings, and I think it's under premium. Here it is, workspace connection. So you can copy this out and put it right there in the tabular server setting, connect. It's reconnecting to this model. Now I can run it, and now I get this data. Now notice how fast that was, okay? Super, super fast. One thing that I worry with the query designer in SSRS is people who are used to that. I don't know if any of you ever wrote a lot of reporting services reports against analysis services, but that query designer does not implement, quote unquote, best practices. But maybe they've improved the kinks. But this query here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it a little bit, okay? Because it's got some variables in here and then at the end it evaluates the result set. This result set is based on this calculate table. This is really the thing that you want, okay? So I'm going to copy this down here. I know this is kind of messy, but just bear with me for a minute. Now this variable here, I'm going to take this variable, it's defined up here, put it down here, because this is all I really need, is I need this statement right here. So if I just grab this and run this, oops, maybe not. Calculate, oh, I have an extra parenthesis somewhere. Oh, evaluate. Huh. So evaluate is like select. You've got to have select. So you got to have evaluate. Okay. So this is what I really want. So I'm going to take this out. Sorry. Take this all out. Okay. Now the other thing I'm going to do is this filter here. So this filter currently is filtering for the film name, but I don't want to filter by the film name. I want to filter by the film ID. Okay. So what is that? So under films, I've got this film ID. Okay. So I want to filter by this field, not this one. Okay, and then this will accept an integer as an input because this is episode 1. So here's my planets for episode 1, 2, and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to now take this query, copy it, and now I'm going to go back to my report builder, add a data set. This one I'm going to call my planets. Wait, did I grab the planets? Yeah, planets. Okay. So planets, I'm going to connect it to that data source. And now instead of going to the query designer, I'm going to open up the query the query function box and paste this DAX query here. Okay, so I'm gonna okay that. And now this is right now set for episode 2. I'm gonna go ahead and do that for right now. Okay, just leave it as episode 2. And then I'm going to insert a table, put it here, and I'm going to put these fields into this table. I'm also going to add a page header. Again, Peter Myers does a great job showing you all of this stuff in his video. I'm going to call this planets. I'm going to try to really conserve space here because what happens is I want this to be exported to Excel. So when it does export this to Excel, every single object that I put in this pane, it's going to create a cell. So I want to try to minimize the number of cells that get exported to Excel. All right, so let me move this and align it. All right, now I'm going to run this. Okay, not the best looking report, but there you have it. Okay, connected with a query that I landed that I got from the performance analyzer, kind of massaged it in DAX Studio for a lot of reasons. I think that's a great way to set up your data sets because it allows you to look at things like performance. If a lot of you are developers in the audience, you'll appreciate this tool because there are ways to look at how many storage engine queries are being executed. If you're not familiar with storage engine and formula engine, then you haven't really done performance tuning yet. So when you get to that point, these two settings here, once you get a little bit more familiar with this tool, you can run these queries and analyze your performance hits and try to optimize your queries like this. The queries that come out of the performance analyzer are not the best looking, but as you start getting more and more familiar with this DAX syntax, and there's some great videos on how to write DAX queries too. SQL BI is kind of my go-to for learning if I'm ever stumped. Okay, so now when I want to save this report, two things. I want to save it to that backed up location. We've already kind of talked about that. So I'm going to my version controlled area. So this is my version controlled area. I'm going to call this planets. I should have called the other one I should have appended it with by film. So I'm going to say this is planets by film. It doesn't have the parameter, but we're running out of time. I don't want to, again, Peter Myers has a great video on how to set up parameters. Then I'm going to publish this to the service. So go to File, Publish, and then kind of the same experience as when I picked the data source. I'm going to pick my workspace, and then I can name this file or name this report. If I wanted to, I could name it something different in the service. So I'm going to name this the same name that I gave it to my backed up file in my version control space. So I'm going to save it there. Okay, so that's how you publish a paginated report. Now, okay, boom, it landed there. So this is what it looks like. And again, it's not the prettiest thing. But here, what I wanted to show you is two things. Well, maybe one thing, because I have to show you how to do subscriptions in my other report. Unfortunately, this does not have parameters, so I can't show you that in the subscription. I'll show you that with another, with my other paginated report. But here's all the different formats you can export this in. Okay, it's not just an image file anymore. You can get the data. Okay, so if I export this to Excel, you guys will see that it's formatted exactly the way I formatted it in Paginated Reports. Okay, I have another example of the characters by film report, kind of a similar setup, except I did do some formatting. And if I, with paginated reports, you have KPI symbols you can insert into these cells. There's spark lines, there's data bars. There's a lot you can do inside of these tables or matrices. So, you know, uh, more stuff to learn probably. And I know there's more stuff for me to learn for sure. But, you can imagine this would be nice to have if I needed like an export of this data, I don't know, on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or, needed to automate the email of this data to somebody. It's just, in some use cases, this is a lot more practical for people than having to go to an online report, filter, figuring out how to filter to the thing that you want to filter on, in this case, my film of A New Hope. And then be able to export it, right? Here, I could just get this as a subscription. So let's look at that real quick. How am I doing on time? Okay, I don't want to keep you guys too long. So if I go to my other report, characters by film, where I do have a parameter. So as we kind of experienced in the report builder tool, I do have to set up a parameter, or I do have to select the parameter here. So I want Revenge of the Sith. I want to look at this report. Okay. So let's say I want this report to come to me. I don't know why it says A New Hope up there. Let me serve refresh. Where's refresh? Let me report. It's a little weird. Maybe I didn't use the right SSRS expression. So I probably messed up there. But anyway, this is the Revenge of the Sith character list. I'm going to subscribe to this here. And add a new subscription. I want to get this as an Excel attachment. I want to use the currently rendered values, the Revenge of the Sith parameter. I can verify that here. Okay. I can change it to, that's one thing I wasn't sure why. I think because it's a required parameter. It doesn't allow me to change it here. But here I could subscribe. I can subscribe. I can put other teammates if I wanted to. I could put the subject line. This is characters for Revenge of the Sith. Weekly report. Include an optional message if I want. Here's the schedule. Okay. I can do it daily, hourly, weekly, monthly. Same applies to like if you want to do a Power Automate job, you can control the frequency. access to the report, link to the report, preview image. I'm going to save and close this. And I'm going to run it. Okay. And then I should have it in my inbox as an Excel output. Okay. Now, Power Automate allows us to do a lot more than just, self-subscribe. Power Automate, like I was explaining to you guys, has a lot of different automations, automation capabilities. So if I go to the home page here, and you can, if you guys have Office 365, you guys could go to this yourselves and set up some free ones. If you just go to flow.microsoft.com, in here, if I just type in, let's say, Power BI, there's a ton of templates that'll come up that I can use that are kind of pre-built flows that may or may not be useful for me. Some of them I might use just to learn what's capable. Send an email to any audience when a Power BI data alert is triggered. Update an Excel table from Power BI. There's just so many things you could do with this tool, right? Well, and using paginated reports, and because I have the control over my formatting, and I can actually export data, not just an image, then maybe I need that data sent somewhere via email to SharePoint. There's connectors, not just to SharePoint, there's connectors to Dropbox, there's connectors to Google Docs, there's connectors to what's another popular one? I don't know. Let me do file. If I wanted to save that paginated report, Dropbox. If anybody knows any other ones, Google. So anyway, I probably shouldn't be showing you this. Maybe your managers won't appreciate this, but yeah, just a lot of things you can do. So if I create a new flow that I want to use to schedule a report being sent via email and being saved to SharePoint, let's just walk through a simple flow. So I'll start with a blank flow, schedule flow, call it test Star Wars Planet Revenge of the Sith. And I don't want to repeat it every minute. I'll just do it once every week. And I'll have it get done on a Monday. You don't really need to do this here, but I mean, because you can always change it after we've created it. So it's kind of like what's the closest thing to this? It's kind of like an ETL tool-ish, like SSIS or Talend or Matillion or whatever, you guys have used in the past. It's touted as like a no-code solution, a no-code type of platform. So you don't really have to type any code. However, when I hear that, it's like, yeah, no code, but I have to know where to click. So I'm going to type in, or I'm going to click new step. So this right here, my reoccurrence trigger, that's a trigger. Okay, there's different triggers. You can have a trigger that's triggered by a button on your phone. You can have a trigger, like a trigger that, like if a file gets uploaded to SharePoint, you can trigger off of that. Okay, so this is a trigger. The next thing I'm going to do is an operation. Okay, the operation I'm going to do that I'm going to look for is to export a paginated report. Okay, so I'm going to export the from my Star Wars workspace. I'm going to export the Planets by Film report. I'm going to do this one for Excel. Okay. Now there's a lot of different setups here. There's RLS roles you can configure for those of you familiar with that. But here, my report parameter, I don't have any report parameters actually, so this is super easy for me. I don't have to set up any of that. So I can just hit save. Oops, I needed to create another step. So after this step, let me go ahead and collapse this. I want to save this to SharePoint now. And SharePoint, create file. So you can search, you can thumb through these different actions or operations. I guess they're called actions. They're not called operations. So there's triggers and there's actions. The triggers cause things to happen. The actions actually do stuff. So here we go. We're going to create a create file action that is going to create that Excel file into this site in this folder. I already have a folder I've set up. I'm going to go ahead and select that folder. So now the folder path is here. The file name, I'm going to call it planets or CGI. What is it? Return of the Jedi? No, Revenge of the Sith. And and very important, I have to put the XLSX extension. If I don't, then the file, it won't be recognized. It still saves the binary. Like I can change that. I can download the file and I can change the extension. But why do that? I want to see it in the browser, right? So in order to do that, you've got to give it the right file extension. Then for the content of the file, here's that content. This is the file content of the exported paginated report. You kind of have to get a little bit familiar with the syntax here and how this, again, they say it's no code, but you gotta know where to click. All right, so I'm gonna save this. Now I want to run it. Okay, it's set to run every Monday, but I want to test this. I want to make sure it works, right? So I'm going to test my flow, test it manually. And so I hit run. And just like SSIS or maybe some of the other tools ETL tools you guys are used to, I'm seeing the success and I'm seeing how long it takes, okay, to do this. So, if I wanted to save a PDF version and an Excel version and a CSV version and do different things with each of those versions, I can totally do that. We had a use case where the customer wanted a PDF version uploaded to SharePoint and an Excel version be sent via email with a hyperlink in the email to take them to the PDF version. All of that you can do with Power Automate. All right, so that's done. So now if I look inside of my document library here, there we go. Let's click on it to be sure. There we go. Okay, and that's gonna be there every Monday. Okay. All right. Let's go back. Okay, so some report tips. So again, I think paginated reports, they can connect to SQL Server databases, especially if you're working with Azure SQL databases or your platform as a service databases, Azure SQL DB, or if you're using Synapse, you can probably connect to your SQL pools. But you stand a risk of kind of report sprawl, right? How many of us have environments where we have a ton of reports and they're all tied to different queries or stored procedures or databases or whatever, and we just can't make heads or tails of it. In larger organizations, it's a real mess, right? So the more we can kind of leverage that certified data set, the one that's tried and true, the one that we check the metrics, the one that we know we're getting the latest planets and vehicles and droids and humans, the better. I also think it's worth it to learn DAX queries. Now there's DAX measures and there's DAX columns. There's also how to write DAX tables. But DAX queries is different. DAX queries is almost like the equivalent of writing a T-SQL query or a SQL query against some relational database. And it has its uses, not just in paginated reports, but in validating your models, checking your models, making sure things are right. Version control your RDL files. So I'm hoping you guys are all doing this today with your PBIX files or whatever. But yeah, you'll want to version control your RDL files. You can always download them from the Power BI service, but you run a risk there. Okay, and I always harp on this on my training classes. If you rely on the Power BI service to be the only place that hosts your Power BI files, if somebody comes in behind you and deletes a file, it's gone forever. Okay, so do yourself a favor. I think I've said this in at least the last two presentations I've been in. Version control your files, and then also test in the service. So classic development paradigm, right? It worked on my laptop. It worked on my server, God knows where, but then when we rendered it into service, it looks a little funny or it exports a little differently or whatever. So make sure, just like any other report, test it in the platform where after you deploy it. Make sure the print layout is fine. I didn't do that. I should have done that. Peter Myers talks about that in his video. So definitely check it out. He does a much better job at the whole development process than I did. So I already talked about building against certified data sets. Yeah, so when we have different workspaces and different models, and you will have this, okay, because the model for supply chain ain't going to be the same as accounting ops, isn't going to be the same as whatever manufacturing, right? These guys all have different wants and needs and data, but how do you organize it? What's the right way to organize it? Well, I'd argue that there's only so much time in a year. And I say that only half jokingly because these models take time. They take time not just to develop, but also to test them and to check them and for people to adopt them. So if you're not testing your stuff before you publish it and you're expecting it to be adopted, good luck. You've got to have people on staff that are going to help you check it, that can vouch for your data quality. So I don't know. That's the only way I know how to do it. Otherwise, you may end up with something that looks like this, right? And this is very common in dev workspaces where every developer is contributing to this massive workspace, and it makes sense, right? It's only a testing workspace. It's not really meant for production, but yeah, we certainly don't want to organize our production workspaces this way, at least in my opinion. Yeah, we already talked about learning to write DAX queries. DAX Studio is your best friend, and Performance Analyzer if you get stuck. And that's it.